Today's session is called LMS Success Starts Here, Conducting a Needs Assessment that Delivers. The webinar today is designed for CE and CME professionals who want to avoid costly missteps by starting with a thorough needs assessment. You'll learn how to evaluate your organization's goals, internal capacity, and program-specific requirements so your team is set up for a smooth transition from selection to launch. Leading us through this important topic is Laura Johnson, an independent consultant and president of LRJ Consulting. With over 2 decades of experience advancing mission-driven organizations, Laura has guided countless teams through complex accreditation processes, secured millions in funding, and built sustainable frameworks that create long-term impact. So I'm excited to introduce Laura to you now, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it. And we have a lot to cover today. I will echo what Amanda said, and I really look forward to having you submit questions in the chat to make this as interactive of a session as possible for you all. And with that, I will share my slides with you, and we'll get going. Okay, so just a quick review of the agenda. We'll start with stakeholders and goals, then go into some functionality and reporting, some extra strategic considerations, then quickly go through next steps after the needs assessment is complete, and then finish up with some pitfalls to avoid and some takeaways. So just framing the needs assessment. The reason for this webinar is that the needs assessment is the foundation for your LMS success. Been through this with several different types of organizations over the last decade or so, and really taking the time to put together the needs assessment and figure out your strategy on what you want from your LMS really allows you to end up with the correct fit for what your organization needs. So we're going to be talking about putting your strategy first and having the features follow from what your strategy and your goals are. So in the first step, we'll talk about stakeholders. Now, each stakeholder will have a different take, so it's key to identify all the stakeholders early in the process and ensure you gather all their wants and needs. I've listed a few different stakeholders here that stand out and are obvious, but I'm sure within each of your organizations, you've got some other crucial stakeholders that may not be on this list, that may be a little bit less obvious that you'll want to be thinking about. One thing I have found in working through this is, and gotten great success with, is after that initial meeting where everyone, talks about the fact that they want to have a new LMS, have individual interviews as a start with each one of these stakeholders. Then take and synthesize all their input and hold a meeting with these internal stakeholders to review and finalize the big picture expectation. Individual voices are heard, right from the start. So I've put together a series of sample stakeholder questions for this interview style, and you could also use it in a meeting. I'm certainly not saying you can't do that. But there's several different slides here. And this first one, the key question is what does success look like? Especially to leadership who may be looking less at the form and function and more about visibility and users. Those two things are different, and you need to understand the goals for each while you're going through this discovery process. And discovering this early can help guide you on the path to setting your expectations towards the best fit for you. One thing I will note is that there's no such thing in this world as if you build it, they will come. So the leadership needs to understand the role of marketing and membership communication in achieving the user goals as well. Now, these questions, this set of 3, really focus on the initial user experience and how it interplays with your organization's overall online presence. So do you care whether or not you have the same branding across from your main website and your main programs to your LMS? What kind of registration requirements you have, and we'll get into those a little bit more specifically a little bit further in the presentation. But there may be other branding type questions that you want to ask within your own organization. For these four, we're more focused on the functional aspects of the LMS. For example, do we want users self-discovering educational content, or do we want to assign content or push them to new activities as they're released, or do we want all of those things? How is your content arranged? Do you have a formal curricula with multiple courses? Do you want an option, do you want that option in the future? Basically, the key point is to identify early and basically the key point there is to really understand who you are and what you're going to be doing with the activities. And then finally, once you've got that information, you want to identify early on what personnel will be managing the courses, because different answers to that question lead to different functionality assessments within the LMS. So we're going to take a pause here because that was a lot as the introduction, and I'd like to see if you all could just, on your own notepads, write down some key stakeholders who are within your organization. If some of you came up with some stakeholders that weren't listed on that first slide, feel free to put them in the chat. Amanda will share some of your thoughts on, as you write and think about the stakeholders. I want to emphasize the importance of your goals, the big blue sky goals that you have, as well as drilling down the goals at the individual, at the more granular level. These will help drive the needs assessment through to the RFP and your selection process. So moving on now to more functionality and reporting needs. I've put these into two big chunks. One is the external experience, for the users, and one is the internal bandwidth and the longer term goals of your organization. Now, I'm going to be going through a lot on this slide because this is the user experience is a crucial point that you want to be focusing on in your needs assessment, and really beginning to understand what you want your users to experience there, either bringing in your own experiences with other LMSs, for personal use or business use. So we'll go through this and we'll get to questions afterwards, because I have a feeling there's a fair amount here. So first, you want to confirm that you can brand the site as your own. Most offer it, but it's good to confirm. Some organizations have subsets within their organization, so understanding whether microsites with different branding within these subsets are, if it's necessary, are available to you. The other thing you want to think about is whether or not you'll be able to have a custom URL that matches your primary URL, so that there's a seamless transition and continuity for the user. That's the highest end of the user experience. Now, depending upon your organizational structure, you may want to explore single sign-on capabilities, which basically means if you have a membership database of some form or another, using that original sign-on as the way to get into the LMS. Regardless of which way you go with that, you'll want to establish what information needs to be captured at registration. For some organizations, it's absolutely crucial to gather the degree, Maybe they want the specialty, maybe they want the license number. It's important to think about how you might want to segregate your audience into groups so that you can push relevant content and or accreditation needs. For the dashboard, functionality and engagement is a prime consideration. You want to ensure it feels modern and draws users in. Basically, a boring dashboard is going to, is going to leave your users less engaged. So having more options and figuring out what options you want from that dashboard will be helpful. With this comes the essential, which is intuitive navigation. It has to be easy with clear icons and tools. If they can't find what they're looking for, they may leave or they'll be less likely to return. There's a lot of different navigation tools or tools that make life easy for the users. One of them, one feature that I found that seems to be particularly helpful is the ability for the user to return to a course exactly where they left off. During your needs assessment, you want to try to get to that granular level as far as the experience is concerned, to figure out whether it's important to your organization as a whole, whether it's important to your users, and include those type of things within your needs assessment. And then finally, regarding the apps can be both web optimized or fully functional apps. What you'll want to do is explore what's most important to your organization. There's pros and cons to both. So it's deciding what's most important to your organization. Now, this is another slide where we're going to spend a fair amount of time because these two slides really get to, the key parts of the LMS experience for the users. And the educational content, is the crux of that user experience. It's the actual learning. So most LMSs offer options for the integration of interactive elements within their content creation. What you'll want to have identified in your needs assessment is what types of features are important to you for your educational curricula. Is it making sure that you can have videos? Is it making sure that you have areas where you stop and ask the users questions to, bring them back into the present? What are the types of things that you feel are important to supplement your education and really bring it to the next level? Now, adult learning support tactics really is a fancy way of saying making sure that there's a reference, making sure that we have the ability to include reference materials or automated clinical reminders or nudges to go along with each of the activities. This in specific goes directly to the ACCME accreditation with accommodation requirement. So it would allow your organization to meet one of the criteria if this was important to you. Even if you don't use ACCME accreditation, these tactics have been shown to significantly improve retention and use of the educational content. So it's something to consider what options you want to see and have available to you. On the community engagement, this is a catch-all for message boards within the activities between users and faculty or even at the overall level. Some of the features, within community engagement include discussion boards, but also the ability to upload materials. This type of engagement is not for all organizations. It's not necessarily for all activities either. So you'll want to carefully review your needs to determine what you want as far as community engagement is concerned within your LMS. For course recommendations, this is simply what kind of functionality do you want as far as recommending courses out to your audience. Do you want to have automated recommendations based from AI, similar to the Netflix model? Do you want to be able to manually have recommendations based on you finished course X, so here are courses Y and Z? Do you want to have it be that these that there are that there are have things that are automated out? What kind of a recommendations, what kind of extra extra nudges do you want to include to keep your users engaged in your LMS and moving through your courses? Prerequisites, it depends upon your overall educational program, but if you have prerequisites, you'll want to explore how the LMS handles prereqs, so that if a user clicks on course Z, he gets notified that he needs to take courses X and Y first before taking course Z. And there are quite a few options for that, so you want to understand how you want to use that and map that out within your organization. Gamification is quite simply the badges and awards. A lot of associations have significant success with gamification. It depends upon your users and your demographics and how your association feels about doing that. It can be a really great way to keep your users engaged with the LMS, but it really depends upon your organization, and that's what this needs assessment will bring out for you. Whether that's a must-have or sure, why not? Why not have it? And then webinar integration, it depends upon whether you're currently doing webinars and whether you would want to integrate them into the LMS or you want to keep them as standalone. You just want to understand what you think is important for today and for the future, and make sure that you're detailing out in your needs assessment whether that is something that's integral or not. And I think I'll pause here for just a moment to see if there are any questions, because that was a lot to cover in a short period of time.
Hey, there are some questions.
Okay, excellent.
And I apologize, my light is spazzing out. All right, so going back to the stakeholders just a minute, how do you balance the needs of different stakeholders, like learners versus admins versus IT versus leadership and the board? Is there kind of a tried and true way to help focus that?
That's the age-old question. Whenever a very large new project comes up within any type of organization, right? The different stakeholders have different takes on where you go. I think one of the primary ways of marrying them together is to bring it back to usually the top level stakeholders really pay attention to numbers of users. And so the way to marry it is to talk about how we have the user experience is paramount here. And so let's take a look at what we can do to gain and retain users. And what the other stakeholders have brought up are these, 10 things that are crucial. And that's across admin and having your learners there. And I think that's one way to bring it back, where everybody's focused on one thing, which is the user experience. And I understand absolutely, as someone who did the admin for a long time on building courses, there's no question that I've used some systems that didn't make life easy. They didn't make it hard, but they certainly didn't make it easy. And I'm the first one to say, make it easier. But really, in the scheme of things, how I feel on the back end isn't quite as important as how the user feels on the front end. And so kind of looking at how to marry those things, and then, put them on, not just pros and cons, but put them on a hierarchy list. On some, it coalesces a lot faster than you think at the very beginning of the project.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've worked on multiple projects, especially as an event manager with project managers. And I remember having 36 decision makers on one event one time. So yeah, going back to the hierarchy idea, I think that's a good one. All right. I have another question here for you. Can you elaborate more on what we should be thinking about for the registration process?
Absolutely. This is one that I've seen with all the organizations I've worked with that they've really had to sit and like this was a few meetings in most of the organizations to really get through what they wanted to have on registration. Each organization is going to be different, but I'll give you a hypothetical that you've got an organization that does education for 3 different types of healthcare providers within a within a subspecialty space. Let's say within anesthesia, you've got RNs, NPs. You've got your anesthetist, and then you've got your anesthesiologist, and all of them have their own credit. Well, a lot. So at the very, very top level, you'll want to, one of the things that you'll want to be thinking about is how you stratify them so that you can push content that's relevant to them and not push them something that they don't really, that isn't as relevant. Without at the same time having them not have access to something that you may not feel is relevant, but they feel is relevant. A PA will look at both the MD and the RN side of things, right? So at the very top level, you want to look, and this goes for people who aren't doing CE either. I'm quite sure that every organization has got hierarchies among their users. One of the other places where you may want to look at is, are there members and non-members, and does that affect pricing? Do you have, if you have e-commerce on your LMS, and let's say members get one price and non-members get another, or members get it for free and non-members get it for a price, you'll want to be able to distinguish between that. And all these little things will come into your registration. If you're using a single sign-on, you're capturing a lot of the information from people who are already members. But don't forget, you may end up having non-members coming into your site. So you want to have the registration process set up so that you can manage these users in the same way, regardless of how they sign up with your organization. I'm not sure if I can think of another couple ones. We had one organization wanted to do it by wanted to do regional programming.
I think we may have lost Laura.
What's that?
Oh, there you are. I think you cut out for a moment. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm trying. So I think where I left off was there are some who have there's one healthcare profession that I know of that has different education, but based on the state, because they have different laws regarding what they are allowed to do or not to do, state by state. So they looked at, it was by state, but then they also set up some regional ones based upon that. So everyone's going to be a little bit different, but it's really thinking about the nitty gritty on the registration.
Got it. Okay, thank you. We have one more question, and then I'll let you kind of move on to the next next topic here. So can you touch on the adult learning support tactics and the increase in retention again?
Sure. So there's a fair amount of literature, and unfortunately I don't have the I don't have the exact citations on me right now, but there's a fair amount of literature out there, right, that shows that reminders after an educational program help increase the retention and use. So a simple thing would be, let's say tomorrow we sent out something after this webinar talking about what adult support tactics are. Basically, what studies have shown is that will, because there's a reminder within 24 hours, that will give you a little bit of a nudge, and it will create like a second pathway network as far as retaining the information is concerned. And a lot of LMSs out there have different formats for being able to do that, whether it's having reference materials so you can download ancillary material to the education, not just the PowerPoint slides, or it's having these nudges or these, thanks so much for taking the course. Here's a hot tip from your faculty member, one more, something along that line. And what these do, if they're automated, is they take the onus off of you. You have to build it in, obviously, to make it automated. But what it does is it gives your education a little bit more, and I hate to use this, but it's the only word that's coming to mind. It gives it a little more oomph. It's just not just a one and done, and there's a reminder about it. And it's something that for accreditation with commendation, you have to show that 10% of your activities use this. And for those who want to go for it, using your LMS is a great way to be able to meet that requirement. Because not only is it more built in and mechanical, and you're thinking about it at the time you're creating you're creating this at the same time you're creating the activity, but you can also get data on how many people downloaded or used the nudge. So you've got the second half of what's needed, which is that you analyze whether these support things had an impact.
Awesome. Yeah, I know with Elevate, even for the webinars like this one, I build in a handful of automatic marketing emails, confirm registration, reminders, and I don't have to think about it, which is really nice. All right, well, I'll hop off and let you continue. Thank you so much for answering our questions. And keep them coming, we'll answer more.
Yeah, keep them coming. Okay, so this next one is a short one. It's about certification and compliance. And I've got 3 bullets on here, but I'm going to really pay attention to 2 of them. And this one's important for you to really think about, because not all LMSs can support multiple credit types for a single activity, a single educational activity. Now, some of you only have one credit type, so that's fine. Some of you don't offer credit, so that's fine. But if you do offer multiple credit types, you will definitely want to ensure that you have a solid understanding of how each of the LMSs that you're going through the RFP and the demo process address the need for that, and then or understand what their workaround is. Because they will have workarounds, and you'll have to decide where on the hierarchy this ends up being as far as how important it is. It's not a huge deal in the overall scheme of things, but it's something that could easily get left off the list of a needs assessment. So I wanted to bring it up. Similarly, the required text notifications prior to course start. With most types of accreditation, there's required information that has to be presented to learners before the start of a course. Almost all the LMSs have some area for this information. So again, it's not really that big of a deal, but I don't want to overlook it because each LMS has a unique way of addressing the need. So you'll want to kind of look at what you hope can happen and have that mapped out. Now, reporting and analytics. Here we're really focused on the back end at this point, right? Because this is not something that the users are going to see or want to see. But I want to focus specifically on the ease with which required reports can be generated or distributed. The first thing that you'll want to do is have a complete list of the data that is needed, both for compliance and accreditation and for your internal stakeholders. Because, the compliance reporting is one thing, but your stakeholders may want to have a lot of other data that you don't necessarily have to have for compliance reporting. And then what you'll want to do is compare this long list of needs that you have with what's offered by the LMS out of the box, and then what potential there is for customized reports. It's something to think about. Everybody's going to have a solution for you. It's going to be which solution best fits your needs, and taking the time to really think about what kind of data you want to capture, and then figuring out how that fits and whether or not you can capture that data is really important in the needs assessment. And now we have our second self-reflection. This one is right at this point, after listening to all of this, love to have you list 3 items are crucial to your internal and external users. And, they can be quick jotting down. I don't want to take a lot of your time, but, my key takeaway from this whole last section is that the user experience, both the framework and the content, are paramount. Plan on devoting a significant amount of your time to mapping out your needs in these areas. And we'll move on. And thank you very much. And this is another big one, administration and management. But firstly, the onboarding and training sources. Every LMS is very different in what it provides for onboarding and training resources. You'll definitely want to review your in-house expertise to determine the level of support you need and compare that to the potential LMS offerings. No matter how or intuitive or easy a system is, there is always a learning curve with respect to advanced user management and content creation. You want to make sure that you have the resources needed to move through that learning curve as quickly as possible, and to be able to take advantage of all the features the LMS has to offer. That's something that, I've learned in the past that, I've learned in the past that the onboarding process sounds wonderful, but there's always something that you feel like you didn't move through the learning curve fast enough on. So really trying to understand what that is and what your training resources is. A lot of LMSs have a university, have it like Academy and University, where there's an opportunity for you to go learn more things. Things along that line. Really just map out what you think you need based on your level of expertise of your entire team and what you've seen, and and figure out what kind of systems you want to have. For content creation, for course creation, you'll want to explore this course creation at the nitty-gritty level, really quite truthfully, for your needs assessment. You'll want to go from start to finish, from creating and using course icons to make them easy to find on the user dashboard, to tagging, again, to make them easy to find, through the actual creation of the content, to course gatekeeping, if you have if you have prerequisites or curricula, to course quiz creation. Can the quizzes include videos and images? Do you want them to include videos and images? What kind of questions there can be in the quiz, to the evaluation process, which again, similar to the quizzes, as can you have branch logic on the evaluation? Can you have can you have Likert scale plus write-in plus anything else, and whether or not there's an automated expiration? Really think about these at the granular level to come up with what you want to be able to do. And so that it gets into the RFP and gets to the vendors so that they can answer whether or not they can achieve your goals. For user management and communication, this gets into the complexities of your audience. Do you want to be able to bulk enroll certain types of users into specific courses? Do you have subcategories within your membership that create the different pricing tiers? Like I mentioned before, similarly, can you create custom communications based on the course that they have completed? Do you want to send automated reminders to complete a course? There's all sorts of different communications that you can set up within the LMS. So thinking critically about how you want to engage with your users helps you at this stage, at the needs assessment stage, helps you be able to achieve those goals once you move on and are at the LMS launch. And then as far as vendor support is concerned, I know that sounds a little bit like the onboarding training resources, but I'm talking about vendor support after the onboarding training resources have completed. It's best to map out what kind of support you'd like from your vendor. Is a chatbot good enough? What kind of turnaround do you want to have for inquiries? Is vendor support 24/7, or is it only business hours? Is there an hourly rate depending upon what you're asking for support with? Those kind of things. You just want to understand what the support is going to be, and gauge it based on what or what you assume you will need. So this is a little bit of a shorter one. I'm going to start with the bottom, which is that IT input is critical on all of these integrations. It's your membership databases, your registration processes, the webinar, the e-commerce. What I want to point out here is that you'll want to think about the future as well as your current needs, so that you're analyzing what may be needed within the next 3 to 5 years, just not what you need today, because most of these contracts are for several years. So you want to make sure during your needs process that you're forward thinking, and you're forward thinking right at the integration level through to other features. So this one, budget and growth, nobody ever likes, you never want to have to talk about this. And every organization has a cost analysis based on their own internal processes. However, a couple of points that I'll bring up as far as this is concerned is that it's important to consider indirect costs that may impact other departments' budgets, such as marketing, to ensure the success of the launch and the overall project. Some may include the staffing personnel costs, some may not. You'll need to look inside your own organization, how you want to set up the budget, but you'll want to pay attention to the growth plan over 3 to 5 years. Because typically, like I said, these contracts are for several years. So that may change the pricing models that you're in at year 3 compared to year 1. Excuse me. And the one other thing I would note is that you want to clarify between registered and active users within the pricing models. They are 2 different things, and each LMS will work with you to provide you that definition. so that you can determine how it fits within your overall needs and growth plan. And excuse me for just one moment. Sorry about that. Thank you. So I sound like I'm harping on this, but since you're selecting an LMS for now and for the foreseeable future, as part of this needs assessment, you'll want to talk internally about where you see your educational content growing, excuse me, over the next several years, and map out what future trends will be important to you. I've listed a few here. There's probably a dozen more that we could look at, but where are you going with AI? How do you feel about it? Where is the LMS going with it? Real world evidence. Where is the LMS as far as its ability to support you in gathering real world evidence? These are kind of the things to be thinking about. And it's, excuse me, it's not the be all to end all, but it's the idea behind it is to keep your needs assessment forward thinking throughout. And now we'll pause to see, because again, that was a fair amount to go through in a short period of time. See if there's any audience questions.
There is a good audience question here, Laura. It's kind of a long one, so it's about the AI tool integration. It's a really great question. So how common is it, and how hard or easy is it to integrate? And the question goes on with a few more, but I'll stop there. So how common is it, and how hard or easy is it to integrate?
Even 5 years ago, I would have said uncommon. But I found in the last round that I just did this past, well, gosh, it was this past spring. All of the LMSs that we talked to had that, I'll call it a smart algorithm for recommending courses once you finished one. So the Netflix kind of model. You didn't see that a few years back. Only a few had them. Now pretty much everybody has that. As far as other AI, all of them seem to be working on it and offering different options on how to integrate and use AI, from automated course creation and helping you with the course creation, which is, a huge step forward, as long as you have someone who's verifying the validity of the content, obviously. But I feel like you're going to find it more often than not, and it helps with it. And the way they're integrating the tools are user oriented now, which only helps with the user experience.
Got it. Okay, great. And the second part of this question really touches on more so any specific tools or types of tools that you're finding actually live up to the hype.
That's an interesting one. Specifically within the LMS, the Netflix model works and helps with engagement. There's no question about it. When you finish a course and it pops up and says, do you want to see this course or this course? It keeps you engaged. Whether the individual has the time to do it right then, because I haven't really heard of anybody binge watching, LMS content yet, but we'll probably get there. But I feel like I know that lives up to the hype. I think the rest of it still needs a little bit more time for both the vendors and the organizations to really figure out how to use these to the best interest of the users. I don't think it's a matter of they can't live up to the hype. I think we just haven't gotten there yet in figuring out how we want to use everything. Is that okay? Oh, please tell me.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry. I
Good.
dropped out.
Sorry, I thought I went away.
No, you're good. You're good. I apologize. I dropped out on you thinking I would just end the questions there, and we'll save the rest to the end because I know
Yep.
I want to
Okay.
make sure you have the chance to share everything with us. So
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we'll move on to, we've got a couple of strategic considerations. I've touched on these a little bit, but I just wanted to spend a little bit more time on this. Assessing the team capacity. The person spearheading the needs assessment and the LMS procurement isn't necessarily the person who'll manage the LMS once the project starts. It's important to map out the key roles early in the process to ensure your organization has the bandwidth for success. So I think that's it's just sort of a point that I want to sit on for a moment there, because a lot of organizations really feel like, well, LMSs are so advanced now, it doesn't take that much personnel, and there hasn't been a project out there that takes less personnel than anybody expects. It always ends up taking a little bit more personnel. So thinking through who's actually going to be touched by this and who's actually going to be part of this process early on is really important, just to make sure you've got, not only from a stakeholder standpoint as far as getting their input, but really just so you get an idea of the tendrils of the LMS system within your organization. Because you want a success and you want everybody's buy-in, to ensure the success. And then the other point that I want to bring up is that the vendor selection is just the start of your journey. You should plan for at least 6 months. I think some people will push it to 4. But I always say at least 6 months between the selection and the launch to allow time for onboarding, user framework setup, initial course creation, the marketing, the getting the marketing behind it to get it out to your users. Like I said, it can be a little bit shorter than that, but as you're looking at your needs assessment and you're putting together your project timeline, I would build in the 6 months and then get pushed back, rather than build at 4 and end up getting pushed to 2. As just, my cautious advice. So that's one of the strategic. Then you guys have heard about this, the scalability and future proofing. I've said it quite a few times, but I just want to bring it up again. You'll want to have your 1, 3, 5-year projections. You'll want to understand your roadmap for those 5 years so that you can evaluate the vendor's roadmap and make sure that they're in alignment. And then for anybody who's got accreditation, we know that things can happen with accreditation as far as the policies and the processes are concerned. So anticipate at that level, and try to anticipate as much as you can at that level. Maybe anticipate whether or not you want to change from, if you are ACCME accredited, from just accredited to accredited with commendation, and how the reporting and analytics can help you with that process through the LMS. So those are just, a few little items. And then I'm going to run through these next steps pretty quickly because I know we're just about out of time and I want to make sure if there's any last questions. This is really where strategy meets the features, because this is moving on to, we're done with the LMS now, and we're looking at how do we find vendors quickly on the RFP and the demos, just to give a few tips that I have as far as that's concerned. Where to find vendors? There's literally thousands out there. That can be overwhelming, to say the least. So I would say, one, for your initial list, I'd suggest combining vendors from referrals within your network and then those from an LMS vendor directory. So have kind of a good mix and have at least a handful in there. Then I recommend finding a comparative site and picking your top 3 to 5 must-haves for a side-by-side review. So what are the 3 or 4 things that you really, really want to see, and check a side-by-side review of that. Case example, this is what I've done with a couple of different organizations. After identifying about 8 vendors, we decided 6 that we wanted pre-interviews with, and then it was down, and from there we shortlisted down to 5. We knocked 1 off. We had 30-minute calls. I found success with this to get to that short list. I kept these 30-minute calls really short and informal. It just helped us understand better what the features that we heard or read about, how they fit with our needs. I liken it to how in a lot of places HR will screen candidates before moving them on to an actual formal interview, and that's what this is. So it's just a suggestion. The RFP is where you translate your needs into the technical requirements for vendors to review. It's clearly important to have brought together all the needs identified by your stakeholders, but I want to highlight the importance of IT here, as they'll have the technical expertise to help with that translation from what we say as needs as non-technical people to the RFP. And then the RFP, what I've used in the last few times is a short list of 5, and then we've shortlisted it down to 3 who give demos. Sandbox access, for those who don't know what it is being able to have your internal team test drive the LMS system, both from the user and administrative experience for real world use evaluation. That can be key to finding any bugs or any difficulties with what you might expect from the onboarding process. Then very quickly, the demo agenda. Basically, the idea behind the agenda, and this is just an example of what I've done, but the idea behind the agenda is pretty simple. Giving them all the same agenda so that all vendors show you the same workflows. And then the last thing that I will say is one of the things that has helped, because there's large subcommittees who are in on these demos, is to develop a vendor evaluation form. This is an example of one of the sections that I used for a weighted scoring across identified needs that were really important to this particular organization. What it does is it adds objectivity, and not just the shiniest demo wins. And then I'm going to do if it's okay with you, I'm going to do the pitfalls and takeaways, and then we can take a last question if we have time. Pitfalls to avoid: pay attention to your strategy. The features will come from your strategy. Don't do it the other way around. Definitely assess your team bandwidth and capabilities, because this is the group that's going to help you succeed. So make sure we've got the bandwidth, or start early on saying we need more to make the bandwidth. Definitely avoid the flashiest demo or the last one to demo wins bias through some form of a standardized evaluation form. Don't underestimate the long-term cost. Pay attention for your 1, 3, and 5 year time frame, and build in the growth that you expect. And of course, and I'm sure none of you would do this, but leaving out IT or compliance would definitely, from the early stages on, would be a pitfall. There's no question. And then the needs assessment's the foundation. I think we've talked about all of the other things, but really, with this foundation, starting with that stakeholders early, and starting with that goal orientation and synthesis will lead you down a path to success. And that is it. And I'll leave that there. And I'll come to you, Amanda, with 2 minutes to spare.
2 minutes to go. Laura, thank you so much. Gosh, that's a lot of really great information. And even for myself personally, not living in the LMS world so much as the event management world, it really helped me to understand all of the functionalities that like Elevate, for instance, or Ethos CE actually offer that meet this, and not to be a sales plug. It just kind of like, it was really interesting to me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We did have one person actually asked if you could share the example agenda again, but I'm actually thinking, since you've put your Gmail and your LinkedIn up, would you be willing to show or share that, and I can send it out, or people can contact you? And actually, I wanted to mention that folks can contact you here as well.
Yes, I'm happy to share my the full agenda and the full vendor form that I had, sample vendor form, the evaluation form, if you want.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll post that on Cadmium University, and so folks can find it easily. And while you're there, everyone, be sure to fill out the post-event survey. Again, we really appreciate it. We keep it short and simple so that it doesn't take much of your time. And with that, I'll go ahead and close out. Laura, thank you again so much. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.